No es, just Larry Mike.
Welcome, Redskins Nation, to this week's episode of This Week at the Park. I'm your host, Chris Wilson, here with my main men, Brian Tinsman and Rich Tadler. What's going on, fellas?
What's happening? Doing well.
Like we always do, gonna just dive right into it. This week we're gonna talk about the pieces that were taken away, talk about the pieces that were added, and the pieces necessary. So, first let's start off with a pair of running backs got waived. Juwan Jamison, Davin Meggett. I believe, well, first of all, when you got a new coach, he has to have room to play around. He has to have room to bring in some guys of his own. I mean, unless you're a staple name, it's kind of hard to stick around. Sometimes even when you are a staple name, it's hard to stick around. I think these guys, if they would have, been more of standouts on special teams, and we all know how the special teams experiment went last year, then maybe they would have had a better chance to stay around.
I wouldn't be shocked to see changes at running back. Running back is one of those positions that Shanahan kind of had his own system for. And, that was Bobby Turner and Mike Shanahan for years have been plucking these running backs from the end of the draft. And, I think Juwan Jamison was a perfect example of that, either a guy who was going to fit in pretty well and be a serviceable back or just not really fit in at all. And I don't think that he really meshed particularly well with the type of running scheme that Jay Gruden was accustomed to running with the Bengals. Smaller guy, young guy, great story. Love to see him catch on somewhere else, but he probably just did not fit the mold of what they're looking for here.
Yeah, and actually, cutting him now does give him a bit more of an opportunity to catch on someplace else instead of in the tidal wave that's going to be coming when they start signing players. But Juwan Jamison, 3 games on the 46-man game day roster, didn't even step on the field on special teams. That's telling. Hey, pal, if you're going to be a backup running back, you've got to play special teams.
You got to find your niche. Same thing, similar with Richard Quinn, the tight end. Good guy, big body, can catch. And with the Redskins not expecting to have as many tight ends, kind of shocking for the position, but not so much for the player because, again, new coach, new toys, what is going to be the scheme? Obviously, we're going to keep the things we do well, but a little room to work with a few new toys maybe.
I mean, he's a guy who had been here before. He was actually a guy that was signed after the season as one of those future contract type guys. An interesting addition, an interesting subtraction. I mean, he's a guy who you kind of know what you're going to get from him. He's a special teams guy. He's a blocking tight end. Does he fit into the picture maybe somewhere down the road? Clearly, he has experience being here, not with this coaching staff, but there's a possibility. Certainly, he knows McVay, so, could he be somebody that they dial up midseason if they need him? Maybe so. But
I think if they were going to do that, you'd keep him through on your 90-man roster, one of 90 through minicamps and stuff.
But they didn't even. I mean, they signed him in January. I mean, he wasn't really getting.
That's not even a cup of coffee. I don't think. I don't even think that counts.
Right. And then last we have one of my favorite guys, the rugby standout, Sav Rocca. Again, we talk about guys that got waived, but we kind of talking about guys that some contributed and didn't quite contribute so well on special teams. One thing that I learned over the years in this league, he's a punter, great punter, strong leg, even still, not afraid to tackle. We know his rugby background, but it's a such thing as out-kicking your coverage. And that can come when you don't quite have a scheme in place that's working. You don't quite have players that's being as productive or, understanding how to get those big, deep punt stops. It is a method to the madness on special teams. Then, again, you got a veteran guy that's starting to get up there in the pay. A great punter, I believe. I think he'll get picked up somewhere.
2 numbers, 1.2 and 32. $1.2 million cap number, 32nd in the league net punting average. I think that pretty well spelled the end.
And net punting, as a team statistic.
Sure.
Net punting is how far the kicker kicks as well as how fast and how well the coverage team gets down there. So I just think the whole special teams debacle that the Redskins suffered last year really kind of hurts.
Well, then we can go 31. That's where he was in gross punting average. So it's not have a great year statistically.
Yeah, I think the other thing too is that you've got your third special teams coach in 3 years, and he's a guy who wants to come in, put his own stamp on things, and you can't really do that with a 38, 39-year-old punter. I mean, that's a guy who certainly specialists can go later in their careers, but he's a guy, his leg isn't going to get any stronger. He's not going to become any less injury prone at this point. He's a guy that, as you mentioned, if you can bring in a young guy for a third of the cost, do it. And unfortunately, that means that another good guy walks out the door. But they got what they needed out of Ryan.
I mean, I've played with a few punters. Some guys are very good directional kickers. Some guys have the strong leg, and because of the standouts that I was fortunate enough to play with, we've done a lot of things. We've kicked the long ball and ran down there and covered it. We did the strategic methods, and it all depends on who's returning punts as well. You got Devin Hester back there, and some of these guys you might just want to put it right on the out of bounds line. But yeah, special teams really is the word when you talk about guys, on the bubble not making a team. This week's episode of This Week at the Park, I'm your host, Chris Wilson, in case you just joined us. My main men, Brian Tinsman and Richard Tandler. Brian?
We got something for Redskins fans out there. Get 10,000 bonus points to redeem for Redskins experiences or $100 cash back. Apply for the Redskins Extra Point credit card today at redskinsextrapoint.com.
Pretty good.
Back to you.
That's a handshakable. Wow. All right, moving on. We talked about some missing pieces of the puzzle. Now let's talk about the pieces that we have. First, swaggy Chris Baker. I like the sign of this guy. This is a guy that brings a lot of energy. Win or lose, this guy's the same all the time. Huge guy. Can't keep his shirt up. Can't keep his shirt down, and he can't keep his pants up. This is a true fact. Look up the stats. Look up the film. Swaggy. Big upside. I like the sign. He's a guy. He is a veteran guy. Brings a lot of energy. We seen him get after Eli last game of the season. I think this is a good deal.
I think what was interesting about his signing is that, he's been classified as a nose tackle. He's been classified as a defensive end last year. He was classified in the press release as a defensive lineman. Now, whether that's telling or not, I'm not sure. But I think that he's a guy that eventually kind of fits into that nose tackle role. Right. I think that you're looking to get a little bit bigger on the defensive line, and Barry Cofield has certainly done a great job, but he's a guy who just doesn't bring that size maybe that they're looking for. It's interesting that Chris Baker, a young guy, brings that combination of big size. He is a big boy, and he's also one of the most athletic guys on the line. I mean, he's fast, and you mentioned he gets after quarterbacks. So is he kind of a swing role guy right now? Maybe, but I think that long term he probably fits that middle role pretty well.
Yeah, and he wasn't a draft pick, per se. He kind of came up from the practice squad, but it was a case of the Redskins story. They developed him. He's one of their own now, rather rewarding one of your own, which
Jacob
something
Burney's
quite missing.
Still here doing his thing. Chris Baker, one of the guys who's big amongst bigs, has a lot of quickness. So when you talk about the D lineman here in the 3-4 scheme, you go down the line, I think you're talking about a lot of defensive ends. A lot of guy that's lined up, head up on the forward technique on the offensive tackles. But when you talking about Chris Baker, you're talking about a guy with the right type of technique, going fast, doing the right things. You're talking about a guy that's demanding a double team. So I think that was a great sign. It doesn't kill the salary cap.
No.
Right.
Very cap friendly.
Very cap friendly. And now the big discussion, the franchise tag on Brian Orakpo. I don't think this is a bad decision. I think the Redskins needed more time, and they brought themselves more time by franchising Orakpo. Looking down the road to keep Orakpo, I think the Redskins need to sign him as fast as they can, long term. Everybody wants longevity in the NFL. It's a tough business. But I don't think this is something that you say, oh, we're just going to franchise him this year, and then we'll talk after that, because I think by then it's so many other teams in this year. I think you could play the game to wait to see if Bryant is healthy. He finished the season healthy. He's going into I bet he's getting with Trainer Gorez or whoever he's going in the offseason healthy as opposed to rehabbing. So I think if we don't sign this guy right away, he has a great season. One of two things happen. He has a great season, then he's hard to keep, and he's going to kill the cap. Or, God forbid, he gets injured or something like that, and then the Redskins may or may not want to keep him, but he'll still be able to play football. Great IQ. I'm very impressed with his IQ.
So you're still coming from the player perspective where you're worried about him getting injured, but,
well,
you know, and that's totally reasonable. I think the Redskins, I agree with you there. I think that they bought themselves more time, and I think that that's what they should be looking for. You know, this is not a situation that I think is particularly beneficial to have him on a one-year deal. You want him happy, you want him productive. And I really think that he's a guy who's a good candidate to build off of last year. You know, I don't know that they can afford to keep him at that current rate. I actually think that they need a little bit more cap-friendly number. But we'll see. I think it's a good sign. And more importantly than just the signing, I think it sends a message to the locker room. That we talked about this a little bit last week, that you are willing to invest in your guys that produce. And he's a perfect example of that. Worked his tail off to get back, had a Pro Bowl season, and he gets rewarded.
Well, let's look at a few things here. I'm kind of taking the opposite tack. A few things I have written on csnwashington.com lately, and actually I have an article on this coming up at noon. I think from what I have heard reported, they were not close to coming to an agreement when they decided to put that franchise tag on. Now what's happened is the Redskins have established his value at $11.5 million. So if I'm Brian Orakpo, why am I going to sign for less than that per year? You just told me that's true. That's true. But you can also take a chunk of that, go to Lloyd's of London, and buy some security if you want. And from the Redskins' point of view, they can keep him on this year. Make sure he plays. Make sure he stays healthy. And you know what? If he blows up this year, and I know he'd hate this, but tag him again. $13.5 million next year. Then he's coming out. 2016, age of 30, you make your decision then. That's not
so
very.
So you're saying, do you like this for the organization?
I think he will.
Or you like this?
Yes, I like it for the organization because they're not committing. Tell you what, if they sign a guy to they sign him to a 5-year contract, then you're looking in 2 years. Ryan Kerrigan is going to be a free agent. Then you'll have to you can't pay both of them big money. You'll have to choose between the two. Why not just pay $25 million over 2 years? Then make a decision in 2016. Do I want Kerrigan at the age of, I believe he'll be 28 then, or do I want Orakpo at the age of 30? So, you know, there's a lot of different things. You know, for right now, yes, sure, they'd like some more cap room. But if what they do now might affect them down the road in 2016, that's what Scott Campbell and Bruce Allen and everybody with their spreadsheets are doing. You know, you put in the numbers and they go down the road. You've also got Trent Williams coming up. His contract will be up that year. Alfred Morris's contract will be up that year in 2016. So that's a big year. So, you know, maybe just buy 14 and 15 with Orakpo and then see where you sit then.
See, there's an alternative to that as well, and that's to sign him for the average amount of, you know, let's say 11.5 over 5 years, somewhere in the $57, $58 million range, but you backload the contract, which would allow him, that's actually not a bad deal for him. Then he hits free agency still in his prime later on if they choose to cut him. But it buys you some time and it buys you some cap room in the meantime. If you can get that number down a little bit and buy some freedom now, this is a team that can produce and potentially, you know, make some moves in free agency, go a little bit deeper than they would if they're paying him that 11.5 now.
I don't know. Do you want $10 million in dead cap in 2016 versus an extra $3 million now that you might be able to shave off of that cap room? It's a choice you got to make.
It depends. Well,
it's a very expensive snooze button to buy you more time either way you look at it.
But the difference is that in 2016, that salary cap number is going to rise with the TV deals and everything else. So there's going to be more money available then if you want to commit that $3 million.
And all it's going to go to Robert Griffin III. He's going to be making $15 million that year.
That's true.
So, you know,
well, I guess I do hear what you're saying. Over the years, see what happens, see what Jake Gruden is doing, see which direction we're moving in as a defense, and then make the big money decision as if the franchise tag isn't big enough money.
Big enough for me.
I think Orakpo would, you know, $25 million for 2 years. I think he could squeeze by on that.
Yeah, I think
it's double tag.
Stay healthy, Rack. Proud of you. This week at the park, I'm your host Chris Wilson with my main man Brian Tinsman and Rich Tandler. We're talking about pieces of the puzzle that we need now. Now we were talking about doing a mock draft last episode, and we're getting that together, trying to figure out who we need. Well, one thing that this organization is doing, one thing that this coaching staff is doing, they're making a lot of decisions that seem like it's just a straightforward decision. It doesn't seem like it's any gray area. We signed D. Hall before free agency hit, making a lot of moves before free agency hit. So it was like guys are just saying like, okay, I see this guy, I know he can play, and it seems like they're calling their own shots. They're not piggybacking, waiting to see what another team does or what another team values a guy. And I love that. But what do we need now? I have to go with middle linebackers. We just lost London Fletcher. Big shoes to fill right there. And we still don't know what's going to happen with Perry Riley as far as getting him signed. You got Hazlitt, who a lot of people argue is on the bubble from going with Shanahan to Jay Gruden. But nonetheless, a middle linebacker in this 3-4 scheme that you want to be complicated. You want to have guys who are experienced enough to call their own shots and understand the concepts of this defense to make the proper changes in a half a second. So doing that with two brand new middle linebackers, I think it's going to be hard to be successful.
Yeah, I think you got to get Riley back. You know, I don't know what his number is going to be. Certainly, they have devoted a lot of money to the defense already, but we knew that going in. I mean, when you have 8 starters that are going to be free agents, you're looking for those holes to fill. You can get a guy like DeQuell Jackson, who has certainly made the rounds already, has been linked in theory to the Redskins, but nothing. Yeah, certainly nothing.
He also got Keenan
has not come here.
He's been to a lot of places.
Right.
Hasn't come
It's out of need.
Who's been struggling with injury, but does understand and know the scheme and has some playing experience.
Yeah, a little bit. But, I think
it's an absolute must.
Yeah, I mean, I think he is, but at how much? I mean,
sure.
He's, his camp is talking about, that Donnell Ellerbe from the Ravens went out last year and got $7 million over $35.5 from the Dolphins. That's what he's looking for. Do you just pay him that, even if you don't think he's worth it? I mean, I think this. This group here, I think they have a number that and that's the highest they'll go. And they might go a little bit past it, but, if they're thinking 4.5 to 5 and he can get 7 somewhere,
Perry
it's
Riley,
bye-bye.
I believe, and I'm guesstimating here, but, I work out with Perry. I dust him off and I kind of help sand Perry. But Perry, I mean, what is he averaging? About 100, 110 tackles a year?
Yeah, he led the team in tackles.
Since he's been starting.
Not missed a game.
Correct. Barely a play, for that matter.
Right.
Yeah.
And he played special teams. Now, I don't know if he wants to keep doing that. That's a load.
He wants that bigger contract, so he doesn't have to play special teams.
I mean, that's
anymore.
a load. That's a load. That's a guy that you can depend on. That's a guy you're going to get your investment out of. I definitely think we need Perry Riley back. Any other needs? And the reason I ask any other needs is because in the mock draft, I truly believe the best pick available for the Redskins might be a wide receiver. And I strongly think that. But, I mean, of course, we have to wait to see what happens in free agency if we sign Perry Riley back or if not. But if we don't sign Perry Riley back, do you think it's a chance that we go for a linebacker in the draft, or do we try to get a veteran guy who's played with Hazlitt before or something like that? I think before I go, I mean, obviously I'm a defensive guy, but before we start talking about wide receivers, the offense, we're pretty good at moving the chains and showed a lot of promise.
I think what you're looking for, especially with Jay Gruden as your head coach, is you're looking for at least one more toy. You're looking for at least one more guy that is a security blanket to Robert Griffin III, because certainly Pierre Garçon has done his job. Jordan Reed is a very exciting, kind of somewhere between a prospect and a rising star. But I think that you need another guy who's kind of that outlet guy. I would look for, everyone's going to talk about Eric Decker, especially with the Philadelphia receivers tied up. Not interested. I mean, I'd love to have him, but he's going to, too rich, far too rich for what the Redskins can handle. I'd love to see a guy like Julian Edelman, who is a little, kind of out in the flat sort of guy. He's a tough guy over the middle. And he kind of fills that role of another receiving tight end that they don't have, that they can't really allocate to.
I want an X factor. I want a guy who you may look at the game film and be like, he's good. This other guy runs better routes. But if this guy gets in open space, boy, he's going. Or if this guy, I want somebody that's, again, like Percy Harvin. Like, okay, yeah, he's catching a lot of bubble screens and not doing so much there. But if this guy, and then you got that guy on one side of the ball, you got Pierre Garçon on the other side, you got Robert Griffin III in the backfield, Alfred Morris in the backfield, you got Trent Williams getting the offensive line going. I think that's going to be hard to reckon with, even as a defender preparing for that on Sunday. It's like, okay, we got to be on our P's and Q's. It's not going to be too much help in this formation on him, or we're going to shift towards him, or we might switch it and say, okay, we're going to lean everybody towards this way, and you on your own for this play. And I think that's how you get those big plays.
Yeah, but those players are rare and expensive.
Well, coming out the draft.
But that might be a piece you want to add next year. Right now, you need 2 middle linebackers, you need 2 safeties.
Right. And that's why I think,
I think that's where you kind of got to go this year, I think. But maybe in the draft you find somebody in the second, third round.
I personally don't think it's going to work with 2 new middle linebackers. I mean, that's the heart and soul. That's the core of a 3-4 defense. You got the safeties and the linebackers always correlating, and moving everybody around. You can have great players, but until you get that chemistry, that continuity, understanding what the emphasis is for those defenses, it's not going to work.
Right. But still, I mean, you got $22 million in cap.
Got $22 million.
You got to devote some to, you got to get 2 middle line, whether it's Perry Riley and somebody else, or 2 somebody else's. You need 2 safeties, whether it's Brandon Merriweather and somebody else, or 2 somebody else's. You need
there's a lot of somebody else's.
Then kind of see what you have left over. For an X factor like that. I agree that I think that there needs to be another piece there. It could be somebody like a Jerome Simpson, a lower priced free agent.
Ted Ginn.
Brandon LaBelle, Ted Ginn.
There you go.
Guys like that. Really, if you look at it, there's 2 wide receiver slots because Josh Morgan and Santana Moss, both free agents. Who knows if they'll sign back? I kind of suspect that they won't at this point. But maybe draft one and get a lower price free agent.
So definitely,
because usually a wide receiver will take a year or 2 to get in, get fully acclimated. So
you got a lot of pieces around you.
The first
sometimes your focus isn't so much everything. It's kind of like my role.
Yep.
This is my role. This is what I need to be ready for, and then pick up everything else as you go along.
One thing that I'd really like to see, if they are going to go out and get that X factor receiver, I'd like to see somebody that can also return the football. I think that's something that you can address with one of those guys like a Ted Ginn. You want a guy who can kind of be that X factor. You saw that with Jacoby Jones in Baltimore, a guy who was a career returner and just kind of 4th receiver who took a major step forward there. He was inserted into the offense and he remained in special teams, and he's made a major difference on that team.
And Joe Flacco got the $20 million, and Jacoby Jones gets to be a free agent this year, and he'll probably collect a few million.
Well, thanks, sports fans, for listening. I'm your host, Chris Wilson. Brian Tinsman, Rich Chandler. Thanks for tuning in on this week's episode of This Week at the Park. See you next Thursday.